Hello, it is the end of March now, and I'm still reading a bunch of books. It is March 26th as I record this. Okay, in this video, I will have a lot of Christian historical fiction, some middle grade books, some classics, a book about minimalism, a biography about the Olympics, and I did my first buddy read on BookTube, and it was amazing. I am getting over sickness. I'm sorry if I sound a little stuffy, and my throat's not in the best shape right now. I'm going to start with my buddy read that I did with Chrissy from Finding Faith in Fiction. This is The Lumber Baron's Wife. When I first saw this cover, I was really happy about how it looked. It's just beautiful. And then I saw that I could get an arc of it, and I was like, yes. This is one of the books I had been looking forward to reading. This does come out, I believe, April 14th. And I saw that Chrissy wanted to read this too. And she said, hey, you want to do a buddy read? And I was like, sure, that would be great. You know, this is something that we both are new at doing, but we got to go back and forth with our ideals on this story. And it was really a great time. We even got to share some architecture because there is a lot of talk about houses and their design. And we both like renovation shows, and I love historical houses, so it was really a fun time. Now, this book is a little bit on the heavier side content-wise with things that might trigger people, so if you have been looking forward to reading this, I hope that I could give you an idea of what it's about without giving anything away. This book takes place in 1875, I believe. It takes on the perspective of mainly two people with an extra account that's short. So in the 1870s, we have Hannah's account. She is a woman that lives in Brooklyn. She has a husband, and she does have 3 deceased children. It is very truly sad. It starts off right away telling us that when we get to know this story. Now, at the very beginning of this book, it was very interesting because I thought it was going to be some sort of mystery thriller, and I was like, oh, I thought this was just a historical fiction. It doesn't really have that much of a mystery to it, but you do uncover stories over time. So this is about Hannah going to Michigan with her husband, starting a new life. Her husband's a doctor. Her husband has this friend who is a lumber baron. They were very much a big deal in Michigan. There were so many of them. And the lumber baron, he has a wife named Kate. And he's like, oh, I hope you two will become friends. Kate is much younger than Hannah. So the two of these ladies get to know one another. But after a couple years, Kate goes missing. So this book is about backtracking on the story of learning about Kate's life and Hannah's experience with her. And Kate does write some diary entries that we get to have included in here. So this book is about trying to figure out what happened to Kate. Now that we go into the future, and the story is about right now with Ashley. She is going to move with her husband to the same area in Michigan. She loves restoring old houses. Her husband is an environmentalist, but they have some things that are clashing, and Ashley's trying to make friends. She is looking for a good job. She finds something that she's passionate about, and her husband is sort of on the edge of understanding her. And it's something that Chrissy and I talked about, is that we did not like him throughout this book. We struggled to enjoy his character. And of course, part of Ashley's discoveries are understanding who Kate was and Hannah, but mainly Kate. All of these women have some sort of pain. There is something that they have gone through, things that they are going through. It's about finding people that you can have community with, really, and learning about how God is there for you and how you could trust in him even through the hard times, and that he can get you through to finding some peace. Now for the content. There are things I really don't want to give anything away, but there are things that include some domestic violence and controlling husbands. There are also things about abortion in this and child loss in general. There are mentions about prostitution and people looking down on them. There are people that get injured and die in this. Even though the content's in there and it might be really heavy, I do like how things were handled. It was more like trying to understand people and individuals. The story was a little bit slow at times in the beginning for me. After a while, I I know that Chrissy also got hooked about halfway or even a little bit earlier. We both were like, okay, I'm done. We were both like, oh, we finished this earlier than we had meant to when we started reading it together. I do think this is a good story about friendship. Another trigger that is in this is there is an attempted rape. Something completely different is digital minimalism. Now, Cal Newport, I have DNF'd one of his books in the past. I have listened to parts of his podcast. My husband listens to his podcast constantly. He is a minimalist. He is into slow living. And at first I thought this was going to be a book about how you can declutter your digital life, but it really didn't have anything to do with that. It was more about how life over the past few decades have changed and how we need to connect with other people and have a sense of community. So kind of like the last book, but this one is real life stuff and how you can reconnect with yourself and others, how you can limit your time on the phone. He even had something about how the like button is like a really dangerous thing. And it was just interesting to hear his say on different topics, even if I didn't fully agree with everything he said. And he gave lots of examples of Henry David Thoreau. And he even talked a little bit about the Amish, some pros and cons from each of those things. I thought it was really good. I needed a good minimalism book after like the last one that I was like, no. Oh, well, it was middle grade March. This was the first middle grade book, I believe. Might have been the second book that I read in March. I do have others that I am reading and some that I read that I'm not going to talk about today. That will be my next video. But Nancy and Plum, I have never heard anyone talk about this book. I'm sure there are people out there who have read it, but I found out about this from my mom, who said she grew up reading this book when she was a little girl. This book was written, I think, even the year that my mom was born, which was 1950. Let me see. This is copyright 1952. My mom was a schoolgirl when she read this, and I've been wanting to read it for a couple of years, and I told her I wanted to, and so she was like, aw, it's cute, okay? Nancy and Plum, they get into a lot of trouble, and their story sometimes is a little bit crazy, but they're two orphan sisters. Their uncle inherits them, but he doesn't know how to deal with children, so he kind of just throws them into a boarding house and just pays for all their stuff, and he doesn't keep in touch with them. The person that is in charge of them mistreats them, but the two of them, they try to have a pretty good attitude. They have a girl that is the niece of the person that takes care of them that they definitely make fun of. She makes fun of them. She's a little bit harsher with them at times. So you do get that back and forth of banter between kids. They do find some adults that they trust and that care about them really deeply. And so in the end, things are worked out for the better for their lives, even after their many years of living under this person that mistreats them. There is definitely mistreatment of children by an adult in this book. There's talk about death briefly. There is an animal that dies in this. There is someone that lies, a little girl, she's constantly lying, not one of them. And there's an adult who steals. I do think it gives some pretty good lessons, and I'm glad my mom told me about it. It was cute. I read it quickly. A Bound Heart. So I need to explain. For my winter reading list, I did have a different book that I DNF'd, and this was the replacement for it. So there is a book, I just read like the first couple pages, and just the content in it, I was like, I can't read this. So I gave it up and I replaced it as soon as I could with this one. It was a better choice for sure. Laura France actually wrote this with the inspiration of her Scottish great-grandfather, one of her greats, who was banished from his country into Virginia. So this character here, her name is Lark. She works for a lord in Scotland that has his own little island. She has grown up with him. They are good friends. And he is married to a woman who has been having a really hard time conceiving. She has had many miscarriages. So if that's a trigger for you, that's something to be aware of. And his name is Magnus, and he cares for his wife and he does his work. Something happens where both Magnus and Lark end up being criminalized for different things. And it's kind of ridiculous why they are and how they are. And so he is sent to Jamaica, she is sent to Virginia. The two of them keep in touch. This is about her being loyal to her lord, even though they are not in the same country, and how he's always cared for her because of their friendship that they had. There are some things in here that it just seemed like there was a lot of buildup. I feel like it was well told though, and things were interesting throughout the whole time, but it was long and drawn out. There was even this one character named Rory at one point who is like sort of a love interest of Lark. In the beginning, it seems like he's very important, and then he kind of like halfway through the book, we don't really hear about him anymore. And I'm kind of like, what? what happened to Rory? They explain what happened to Rory, but it's just like, I thought there was something being built up, and I just don't think it was well written about him. There are lots of mentions of slavery in here because of the fact that she is sent to Virginia in the 1700s. There are accusations, death. There is someone that we think might have killed themselves, but we're not sure. That is spoken of many times. There are illnesses and there is violence. But I thought it was a good story. She actually works with herbs a lot, and she loves to help people and to find natural ways of healing. I really liked her character. Every Home a Foundation. This is a book that I read with a book club from Bookish Kelly. This was a book actually I chose and it got voted on, so I was like, yes. I had been wanting to read this for like a year, and I was really glad. It turned out really to be a very good book. It's mainly about the importance of God being in the business of home building, how we could care for our home, and how in a way this is living out a sort of mission of glorifying the Lord through how we handle our home, the people within it, how scrubbing your floor can glorify God, that there's a discipline and simplicity, that the work of our home is an act to love our neighbor. I love the encouraging words that she used throughout it. It flowed really well. I love the themes of every chapter. And as someone who's a stay-at-home mom who loves to clean and who is a minimalist, this one reinforced some things to me. The Moonlight School. This started out kind of devastatingly. There is a scene of this woman, Lucy, when she was still younger, because they jump in time later. She is watching her toddler sister. She's reading a book. Her sister falls asleep. They're waiting for their father. She goes missing. And then years jump, and we're like, what happened to her sister? I was really hoping that we would have like investigation stuff going on, but then the story turns to where she is going to be with her father's cousin. She wants to work, and in doing so, she ends up going into the mountains of Kentucky to deal with the people there that are illiterate. And while she's there, she's going to read letters and write letters for the people. She learns a lot about life there. She starts to form a relationship and a bond between two different men, trying to befriend them and see what goes on from there. One is a man that works for her father, and her father is in the lumber industry, so we had a little more of that lumber baron issue because her father is one. And then we have a humble man who is preaching and teaching songs in the mountains using symbols for learning how to read music, which is funny because when I was a kid, they used the same method for teaching me, and I thought that was really clever. There are also other characters in this, like this one young guy named Finley who has like a thing for her, and Angie who has a thing for him, and they're really young. And they are people in the mountain that have an education. Finley doesn't really have much of an education, and Angie is always trying to like push him to do better. She is like the most educated in the mountain. She likes to teach people. She wants to be a teacher, but she has to finish 8th grade first. A lot of this book is about the high illiteracy rates in the mountains during that time and how there were these moonlight schools to help teach adults. But that stuff doesn't really even happen in this book until much later. So because of that, I was a little disappointed of how long it took to get to that. I thought that was going to be the whole point of this, but it's mainly about Lucy and her life. I was disappointed with the ending because I wanted this one situation to be resolved correctly. It was like, no, don't do it like that. So it bothered me that there were things unresolved. I don't want to give away spoilers, but I was just left longing for a better ending. The only content that I remember in this is they make moonshine and there is drinking. There might have been someone that smoked too at one point. Okay, here is the doozy. This is the last winter book that I'm going to talk about now that I'm going into the spring books. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame de Paris. Okay, I gotta explain something first. I know a lot of people probably grew up on the Disney version of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I did not. I remember when that movie came out and I didn't really have an interest in it. I was probably around 13, 14, I don't know, something like that. But I was raised on the 1939 movie version with Maureen O'Hara. I loved it. My family watched it on a regular basis. My brothers and I still quote it because we just loved it. Charles Lawton played the Hunchback and he was brilliant. One of those movies that reminds me of my childhood. But because of that, I wanted to read the book to find out what is the real story. I didn't even watch the animated version till after I had my children, which actually is a very good version. Now that I know the story, it's not too bad, but all of them are wrong. They had to make this such a happy tale. No, this is a very sad, depressing story. What is this book is what I kept saying while reading it. Because first off, as much as I love this story, most most of like the first half of this book are chapters that are just describing the Cathedral of Notre Dame and Paris and all these different places in that area from what they looked like in the 1500s, giving a full history background about it, going into the current time of when he wrote this in the 1830s. And I was just like, why do I need to know all this? Give me the story. So he kept putting parts of the story in between these chapters. And finally at the halfway mark, it was like just the story. And I was like, this is just not well done. And I'm sure like it is interesting to learn that history. So let me tell you about this story without giving things away, because it is one of the most depressing stories I have ever read. So Esmeralda, she's like 15, 16. She is a gypsy girl. They state that she is Egyptian. She doesn't know who her parents are. She has this piece of jewelry that she knows is her mother's. She is doing her best, living her life. There's this older guy, Pierre Gringoire. So Pierre, he is going to die in public, and they say, hey, if a young maiden will marry him, and Esmeralda's like, yeah, I'll marry him. Hi, I'll help him, just to help him not die. And so they end up having this marriage thing, which is funny because I've never heard of this being a thing in any of the movie versions, but this is how the book is. And she has this goat that does follow her around everywhere, and Pierre likes this goat too. And so he's like, oh, you have a nice goat. So they become friends because there's nothing, she doesn't want to be intimate with this man. He's much older. She's still a child. She's a young woman, but all these other men are so very into her. Claude and Jihan, they are brothers. There is Quasimodo, which basically they raised. His backstory, by the way, Quasimodo's, is very sad. And it is something that I had never heard it told like this. So I really like that I know the story now. But one of these guys, he's like the King Doctor's consultant or something like that. And he's an archdeacon. So he's very much ahead in the church of the cathedral. He is obsessed with Esmeralda. It's really gross. And that's Claude. Jihan is a drunk. He gets into a lot of trouble, and he's friends with Phoebus, who is a captain, who is also obsessed with Esmeralda, like all of these guys. And Quasimodo is the hunchback. He is disfigured. He is mainly deaf because of all the bell ringing at the cathedral. He is very heartwarming, soft-hearted. So this story is mainly about all of those characters. And I feel like that's as far as I can go to tell you this story. There's a lot of drama that takes place. I really think that the story, without all the historical stuff, is really beautiful. It's depressing as can be, though. These grown men are really gross. Quasimodo's the only man with decency. He tries to protect Esmeralda a lot. She thinks he's ugly, though, just so you guys know, like, it's not all lovely. But I will say that there is a fade to black scene in this with romance. There's also an attempted rape. There are these men trying to seduce and take advantage of a teen girl. There's talk about cannibalism. There is death. There are hangings. There are homeless people. There's racism against Africans and Romas. I wanted to really, really love this story, but because of the way it flowed and it didn't really flow, I couldn't, and because of just how the story ended up. This was the book I kept telling my husband throughout the past few months, like, this was the book I was really, really looking forward to for my winter reading list. And it wasn't bad. For the last book that I'm going to tell you about, I loved this book, The Tiger Bells. I needed to read an Olympic book, especially after watching the Olympics. And I know this one's not a Winter Olympic book, but I've been wanting to read this for a while. And then it was so cool because this has been on my TBR list for several years, to have myself put it on my yearly list to read. And then I saw that, like, on Goodreads, there was a list of books about women, and this one was listed. And I was so surprised because I'd never heard anyone talk about this book. This is just me being obsessed with reading about Olympians. This story is really great. This is about a group of women called the Tiger Bells. They were in Tennessee State University during the 50s and the 60s, and even after that. And their coach that really cared so deeply about them as individuals that he was like a father figure to all of them. And his wife too was a mother figure. The two of them were giving so much of their life to these young women so they could be protected from a lot of harm, and that they could be trained as young women, but also as athletes in a time when athletic women, it was like still pretty new and looked down upon. And this coach was like, I am going to make you guys Olympians. And he totally did. There was already a woman on his team that had been in the Olympics, but she came back with him coaching her. So these women, they are track stars. They do relays, they do sprints, they do hurdles, and they do long jump and throwing. And so this talks about mainly the coach and his style of training without being overbearing, without giving loads of information of how he trained, but he did have a strict set of rules. And then about how the lives of each of these women, how they were impacted and how they became champions because of his determination and the hard work they put in under him. There is a lot in this book about growing up in a time with segregation and what that was like for them, and how they really wanted to be a part of a lot of the sit-ins and stuff like that. But because their coach was like, I'm going to teach you how to fight in a different way through your sport. I loved his determination and that he really didn't want any of them to be harmed physically. Just like these women were amazing. There are talks about women getting pregnant out of wedlock, and there are racist terms used, but they're like just shows the N word with just stars behind an N. So you know it's being derogatory said about these women, and it only came up like 3 times. You know, they censored it, which I really appreciated. Otherwise, this is so good. If you like biographies and stories about Olympians, I really recommend this. This is one of the best books that I read in March. Well, until next time, everyone, where I'll give you some more middle grade books and some other books that I am in the process of reading. And now I could finally jump into my spring reading. I'm waiting until March ends, so I only have a few days left before I can start reading from those books. But I have my spring list that is coming out after this video at some point this week, so you could see all the books that I want to read in the springtime between April through June. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you're having a wonderful rest of your March. Enjoy your April and keep reading, but I am going to try my best to slow down because I want to be outside doing things with my family. I won't be cooped up inside anymore, and that's when I read the most. Okay, well, goodbye.